Cool. Yeah, and then, so without further ado, I'll hand it over to Teemu, who will talk a little bit about Metaplay and free-to-play games. All right, let's see if I did this right.
Boom.
Boom.
Good.
Did it work? Okay, great.
Sweet.
Thank you.
Thank you, Colin, and I'll try to do this so I don't have to touch it. So that is good. Hey, everybody. Good to see all kinds of friendly faces in the audience and also new ones. Hopefully, I get to chat to all of you by the end of the evening. So, first of all, thanks for organizing this event, all of you. It's lovely. There needs to be more actual game design talk in Finland, not just the business talk, even though that's also what I do. Yeah, like that's why we're here. Love it. That's also why we're sponsoring tonight. So have a donut, etc. This is important. Maybe a beer later on. Maybe, who knows? So briefly about me and why am I here and not somebody else. So first of all, here's some games that I've been working on. So my whole career is in mobile free to play, essentially. It's about 15th year, I guess, in the industry at this point. So it's in a couple of iterations of this. And I do work with IGD a lot. Got a Lifetime Award some years back. But the kind of relevance is that I'm also a co-founder and chief product officer at Metaplay. We do free-to-play backend technology. So we work with companies who make free-to-play games. And I'm not going to talk about Metaplay all that much. But instead, I want to sort of ask a question that I've been thinking about a lot, and maybe that can spin off a couple of conversations later on. So I'm going to make this statement that all projects, game projects, have this fundamental tension of do you really optimize for the problems that you have right now or the problems that you think you might have later? And you can only do so much, so what do you do? And I think this is actually quite existential that kills off way too many games. But to explain this a little bit, we need to talk about what's the context in which we do games. It has to do with business, obviously. So we start to make a new game right now. What do we want to make? I'm a mobile free-to-play guy, so I'm going to use that as an example, but we can transpose this to other genres, industries, platforms, what have you. Well, usually if I take a product kind of focus, I care about what's even possible, what's feasible. So we can look at the top grossing, for example, and see what kind of entertainment has found an audience. What's the product market fit, if you will, in this type of a device, this platform, all that. And if you lean back and squint a little bit, some very obvious patterns start to emerge, right? If I pick a few, if we want to make a very successful mobile free-to-play game, it has to be, first of all, very large. It has to be a mass market hit because niche games can't thrive on this platform for various reasons. And if you want to make one of those, well, then we need roughly two things, right? We need something that retains for a long time. So it's not a one-off. It's a hobby, essentially. And to make hobbies, we can again kind of look at the patterns that have emerged, that it probably needs to be somehow socially meaningful as a game. Otherwise, people don't stick with it for a very long time. It has to be relevant over time, which generally means that it has some kind of events or something that renews the game over time. It feels like a living place that is worth coming back to in addition to being social. And I'll just boil it down into a content bonfire. Like somebody said in the game's first, content equals retention. So if you don't have meaningful things to do, then people go elsewhere because there's an endless amount of content elsewhere. So you kind of have to satisfy all of these, otherwise you're not even going to have a solid chance of attempting a hit free-to-play game. But in addition to having this long-term hobby, you need to make money. So it's a function of having the right amount of retention plus the right amount of monetization. And to get to that money-making bit, you generally have to do things like, well, the game absolutely needs to be cheat-proof. Because if you can cheat yourself away from purchases, you're not going to do purchases. Like rule number one. But also that the shopping experience inside the game has to be, I'm being pointed to move. Just move the desk a little bit. Maybe this way. Hopefully that's better. Nice, getting a thumbs up. The shopping experience, the experience of spending money needs to be part of the entertainment. It's not something you pay to skip the game, right? No, you pay because you want to have even more fun in the game. You're engaged, you're a fan, that sort of thing. And increasingly, these games are personal. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all experience, but it's more like maybe the games start to be segmented. The shops have things that are actually relevant to you. Not everybody wants to spend 2,000 euros on a hat, but somebody does want to spend 2,000 euros on a hat. So like, how do you kind of tailor these choices out, whether it's spending or the game experience itself? So without going into way too much detail on any of these, if we start to have this high-level spec of we can still do whatever we want, but it generally has to satisfy these kind of general goals. Okay, so what do we build? From like a game designer, me goes off and says, well, let's start to do a sort of a shopping list of the things that we want to do. So we probably need to do something, like we need to have a system that has all this online, like it's an online game that you need to be able to log into that exists while you're not there. We need, because it needs to be cheat proof, so then the game needs to be running on a server, like you need all of this before we can kind of get going. We mentioned something about the game being a social experience, so okay, we need to have some kind of way to build out a multiplayer experience that, you know, whether it's real-time gameplay or guilds or something else, whatever the multiplayer or social means for you. We mentioned that we need to have this way to work with the content, so we really need to be able to push out over-the-air updates, etc., because shipping builds is way too slow, otherwise we don't have anything. We mentioned something about this, you know, personalized experience and so on. If you're going to have this long-term relationship with the player, then part of the entertainment experience is that they're able to reach to us, the developers, outside of the game or in addition to the game to talk to us, right? Like they have a problem, they need to be able to talk to somebody. That we kind of can't, we have to have that level of service quality. And then obviously to kind of keep the game live, we need this concept of live ops and all the tooling behind it and so on. So this is just kind of me switching between the design requirements and sort of what is the game that we are starting to build. And I'm not going to spend a long time on the technical side of it, although that's literally what we do. But the problem we're getting to here, that if I now go to a lead programmer and say, here's what I want to build, so what do we need to make? And the discussion goes something like this. So we have these players coming in, and there's going to be 100 million of them, so we need, you know, load balancers and stuff to equalize the load. Then we need to write our game logic that runs in the cloud, but that's different to the multiplayer logic, which is way more heavy, so we need to have a separate system for running that. You mentioned there's going to be game config, so that implies asset downloads and stuff on the side, and we needed to persist the players, so we need databases, right? And we need also to be, in different order, we need to be connecting to, you know, in-app purchase validation, sending notifications, so there's all kinds of services that we need to be connecting to. And all of this starts to describe, you know, our game server, our game cluster, which needs to scale horizontally, vertically, all that. And now that we talk about clusters, that means we need cluster management, and we probably need some kind of automation to actually do that cluster management because everything else is insane. And now that we have this thing in the cloud, we need to know what's happening with the server. So we start to talk about logging, for example, monitoring and logging tools, which are kind of different things. And you also need to know what's happening with your game experience. So that means probably adding game analytics. And did somebody mention live ops? Yeah, we should probably do live ops tools. And that's where it gets complicated afterwards. And the point that I'm doing here, kind of presenting here, is that that's insane. Like, we don't right now go off of this room and start doing something like that. We still need to make the game itself, but there's a lot of dependencies on the full experience that we want to make. Okay, so nobody does this. What do you do instead in real life? Well, we look at ourselves and generally say, we want to be a small team. Everybody always starts from a small team because that's how you get to be agile and, you know, let's just jam this game out, and if it's good, let's have a company. So you have to fall back into, right, reality check. What is the minimum that we actually need to do to make sure that this thing that we want to build is worth building? And it goes back to your business goals. And there's this overall uber simplified list of priorities that you have as a new company. And the important thing is that you have to go through it in order. To be able to raise money, you have to first have a prototype or a game that's worth making, that somebody believes in. If you don't have that, then all the rest of the steps are academic and not even worth listing. So then suddenly our focus right now, whether we're game designers or any other role, is actually 100% into, right, how do we know that we have a hit game worth investing in? and then suddenly your list of requirements is quite different, right? Like we're no longer thinking about what's the ideal entertainment experience. We're more saying, no, let's make something that's got core gameplay and it's got some analytics put in so that we can measure it while do it as fast as we possibly can, because otherwise we're going to run out of money, right? Like these are the things you're actually optimizing for. And obviously, then when you break it down into a shopping list, that shopping list itself is going to be quite different. You're willing to make different kind of trade-offs rather than in a big product, which needs to be perfect from all angles. And in this technological example, also what you need to build, your minimum building blocks, is way, 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 way smaller. And while that seems like, hey, that's what we should do, but then what I want to point out again is that if we really go through this pragmatic route of let's just build the minimum viable, prove it, and then go from there, you ended up building something that is 100% different to what your vision actually was. And I think this happens a lot in games, right? Where you say, we are going to make something that's going to be amazing. It's going to be a casual mass market hit. Or like we're going to redefine what an FPS looks like on mobile. And then you end up making this straight up small piece of shit that nobody cares about, because that's what you were able to make with the resources that you had. And the plan was to do that and then get the resources to make the thing that you actually wanted to do. All right? Almost everybody has the experience of soft launching a game, being disappointed in the metrics, and then kind of saying, yeah, but anyway, it only had like 1 level and we want to have like 100 levels, or like this is not really the game. If we just invest $500,000 more, maybe it's going to be better. That's the problem, right? And I think that's my statement, that what we need evolves over time. Our requirements evolve over time. And the question I'm going to leave you with, because I don't have any answers. I've got a lot of technology, but none of the answers. How do we do this? How do we make stuff now, today, quickly, something that we're able to make, while actually not shafting ourselves completely on the big thing that we want to do long term? So if you've got any ideas, talk to me about it. But happy to be here. These are the big questions, right? Let's talk about it. Thanks for coming. And off to the next person.